Hi, I'm Richard Karn, and you may have seen me on TV talking about the world's #1 expandable garden hose. Well, the brand new Pocket Hose Copperhead with Pocket Pivot is here, and it's a total game changer. Old-fashioned hoses get kinks and creases at the spigot, but the Copperhead's Pocket Pivot swivels 360 degrees for full water flow and freedom to water with ease all around your home. When you're all done, this rust-proof anti-burst hose shrinks back down to pocket size for effortless handling and tidy storage. Plus, your super light and ultra-durable Pocket Hose Copperhead is backed with a 10-year warranty. What could be better than that? I'll tell you what, an exciting exclusive offer just for you. For a limited time, you can get a free Pocket Pivot and their 10-pattern sprayer with the purchase of any size Copperhead hose. Just text WATER to 64,000. That's WATER to 64,000 for your 2 free gifts with purchase. WATER to 64,000.
By texting 64,000, you agree to receive recurring automated marketing messages from Pocket Hose. Message and data rates may apply. No purchase required. Terms apply. Available at pockethose.com/terms.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Fiscally responsible, financial geniuses, monetary magicians. These are things people say about drivers who switch their car insurance to Progressive and save hundreds. Because Progressive offers discounts for paying in full, owning a home, and more. Plus, you can count on their great customer service to help you when you need it, so your dollar goes a long way. Visit Progressive.com to see if you could save on car insurance. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states or situations.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Attack the Baseline, a WNBA podcast where every episode we attack our baseline knowledge of the WNBA. We're your hosts, John and Kristen Barber, and today we're here to talk about the last place Connecticut Sun, who have a lot of different things going on in terms of their situation as it stands right now. So we're going to get into all of that. But before we do, Kristen, how are you?
Hello. I'm pretty good. I struggled a little bit as a Sun fan this week, I'll admit. But sometimes a fan struggles with their team.
That's true.
I'm not, we're used to that partly in Philadelphia, other basketball teams. So that's okay, I think.
Sure.
I still enjoyed it.
And it's not every week that you have to, you're following the team when they're experiencing their worst losing streak in franchise history. But these are things that we will talk about as we get into it later on. And joining us today, who you've heard him on the show last year talking about the Connecticut Sun, and now he has a very different Connecticut Sun team to discuss. It's friend of the pod, Matthew. Welcome back to the pod, Matthew. How are you doing today?
I'm doing all right. Doing much better than the Sun are, because it would be impossible not to be, actually.
I think you nailed that. So I'm looking forward to hearing your outlook about this team. And of course, as you are based in Portland, there will be much to discuss about Portland as well, which is joining the WNBA very soon. But before we get into that, if you're new here, welcome to the show. If you would like to reach out and let us know how you're feeling about any episodes or about your team or a topic you'd like us to discuss, you can do so at our email, attackthebaseline@gmail.com, or connect with us on Bluesky or Instagram at ATBPod. Check out our TikTok, also ATBPod. And if you'd be so kind as to leave a 5-star rating and review on whatever platform you use to listen to us, that would be greatly appreciated. And now let's get into the show. Right up top, Matthew, where are you at on your Connecticut Sun? Because last year was a lot different than this year.
Yeah, well, no, I was joking, because I just obviously was up at the Seattle game, 2 days ago, and it's the exact same day, randomly coincidence, as last year. When I was there last year, they were the first place in the league. This year, coming in last place in the league. So obviously, yeah, big difference there. Yeah, I mean, my big takeaway is that it's a lot worse than I expected, because obviously you expect, losing all those players, you expect them to be bad. but it's really another level. And I think one of the things that I was really thinking when I was not wanting to go back to my seat at halftime because the people behind me were very loud and obnoxious, and so I was like hiding in the concourse, and I was trying to look up some stuff about some of these players. One of the things that I think fascinates me is that you don't realize in basketball is that like somebody can be good as like a bench player, a role player, and then they just can't necessarily be. You can't take that and transform that into like being a starter. And so I think that, you lose the starters, that's bad. And then you're forcing players to play in roles that they're not really capable of doing, or they're not as efficient. And like one of the things that I thought was really interesting, and I got her stats pulled up here, is Olivia Nelson-Ododa, who last year I thought, wow, she's really good. I'd love to see her play more. And, expecting her to start, I'm like, oh, it's going to be good. Her shooting percentage went from 56 last year when she played 11 minutes a game down now to 48 when she's averaging 22 minutes a game. So she's playing twice as much a game, and her shooting's, like 8 points lower. And so it's just stuff like that that's like, she was good when she's not being sort of required to be one of the primary shooters. Now she's being required to be one of the primary shooters. And so it's like, not only are you losing your good players, but your okay players can't be as good as they used to be because you're asking them to do too much. And so, it's like kind of not surprising that they're so bad, but also surprising that they're so bad just because the players who you'd expect to, sort of pick up the slack can't do that. And so, that's how they go from first to last in one calendar year.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you said it, you mentioned that they've replaced all 5 of their starters, a remarkable thing to occur in, any professional league, that the 5 people that played all your minutes last year are completely gone. The roster is picked apart. The last remnant of this team is basically Marina Mabry, who you traded for mid-season last year. And unfortunately, this week, we did not have an opportunity to watch her play because she was dealing with a knee injury. Yeah, you have people in roles that you weren't expecting them to necessarily be in, and you're forcing them to see if they can thrive, and they can't necessarily thrive. So it makes it a tough watch at times. I feel like there are definitely moments as we watch this team that they're sort of sleepwalking through some of their actions. There are notes that I took while we watched some of these games that were just like, I don't really know what they're trying to do, let alone what they're doing. Sometimes they're shooting more threes, sometimes they're not shooting at all. And then you said it with statistics, like some of their numbers are just falling off a cliff because they're in these expanded roles that they don't necessarily fit into. So I want to take it all the way back, because when you decided to follow the Connecticut Sun, you were there because of Alyssa Thomas, one of the greatest in the W. Now that she's not there, I just want to get like your temperature on like how you feel as a fan of this team, because you hitched your wagon to the group, and now, you're going to have a local team in the coming years in Portland, where you're located, and, overall temperature check about how you're feeling about the franchise, I guess, as a whole at this moment in time.
Yeah, well, I think you bring up an interesting point about them like sort of being kind of rudderless sometimes. Like one of the things that I thought especially was obvious there live in Seattle was like they play like amazing fast break defense and like stop the ball in the fast break, and then all of a sudden they just like Seattle shoots like a wide open shot, and you're like, how did you play such good fast break defense and that horrible like regular 5-on-5 defense? Like you stopped 4 with 3, and then you can't stop 5 with 5. Like, so there's just like a weird like lack of identity, which I think really is interesting, because you talk about like losing AT, and I feel like part of what makes her so good is that she like can control an entire game in terms of her pace and her everything. And so it's like now, you have all these people who are sort of at the level of being 6th, 7th person on some of these better teams. And it's like, none of them can sort of have that control. And so you lose that. Yeah. I mean, but again, having a team that, absolutely sucks, that's all the teams I support. So this is much more comfortable where I am, rather than last year when they were good. and especially even the like being really good and then all of a sudden being like horrible the next year. I guess it took 2 years for the Blazers to completely collapse after making the Western Conference Finals, but still they collapsed, fully into being a lottery team 2 years after being in the Western Conference Finals. But yeah, I mean, I think the issue with this team is there's nothing that looks like there's any kind of identity, because one of the things that I thought, especially watching the like fourth quarter of the Seattle game, is that like there really isn't a big gap between like the best players and the worst players on this team. The worst players, were significantly better than the bench players on Seattle, like when they're playing there, right? Like when it was bench players versus bench players, Connecticut scored 15 unanswered points or something, and then ended up winning the fourth quarter, which obviously doesn't matter when you lose by 16, but I think it's just an interesting thing there, right? If it's like when your last player on your roster is pretty close to your best player on your roster, it's like I don't know how you necessarily get better there, right? Like I think you'd much rather be a team that has good players and bad players, and you're like, well, everyone's okay, and you're like, oh well, how do you improve and get better? And the answer is very difficult, I guess.
Yeah, I'm curious how you feel about the coach and the new coaching staff, because those are also all new people compared to last year.
Yeah.
And they are kind of the ones who, I guess, set the culture really from the backbone. So how do you feel about that?
Yeah, I mean, again, it just seems like there's not much there. It seems like they're not doing such a great job in that regard. It seems like people are playing in in roles that they don't necessarily seem fit in. And part of that is like trying to build a team that gets your best players playing. But it's like what they were playing starting at Seattle was like, 3 guards and 2 centers. There's only like 2 forwards on this entire team. It's just like,
right.
There's a weirdness to like how this team is built that it's like, it's almost like when you like look into the like bones of this, it almost sort of makes sense that this team like doesn't have an identity, which goes back to, like you said, there's a new coach, a new GM. And like I said, when I thought that, hey, so with some of these players that are returning, the bench players to step up, you're like, oh, is it possible this team could be like, okay, not like 10th team in the league or something? And it's like for them to just not be anywhere close to that. I think that's part of what you're saying, Kristen, of them just being like, they're not being a culture, they're not being these systems in place, because, there's a lot of like really athletic plays that you can see out of these players. With better coaching, this team could be better. Could they be good? Probably not. But, it's certainly a part of why they're not anywhere.
Yeah. There were moments in time, especially where they would cut to Coach Mezian and he would look so deeply unenthused. I feel like it's copy and paste every time I see his face, that he either doesn't emote a ton or he kind of just looks like generally annoyed with the state of things. And I guess that's like when you come from coaching the Belgian national team and the success that he had with the Belgian national team, of course, the Belgian national team in the finals of Eurobasket this year, and he's not the coach. I have to imagine like there are moments in time that I kind of feel like he's almost going to be this sacrificial lamb in this like gap year for Connecticut as they kind of figure out what their identity is, like you said. But it's interesting to me that, coaches like Chris Koklanis in Dallas, Tyler Marsh in Chicago have gotten so much heat for how bad their teams are, yet we never hear anybody say anything about Coach Mezian in Connecticut. And I think that just shows you the vast difference in expectations that those teams had, with a Paige Beckers or with an Angel Reese versus Connecticut, who has Marina Mabry and, a couple rookies that are interesting. Like it just sort of falls off a cliff there. So I kind of don't really know what their plan is going to be, say, next season. And, there's a lot of interesting things that we can get into about the potential of this team relocating, perhaps to Boston or perhaps to another city, but they kind of just feel like they're rudderless, for lack of a better term. I actually want to talk to you, Kristen, because you and I were talking about this in the car earlier today about how Golden State is kind of a team of all 6 women. And then you think this Connecticut team has some starters in these starting roles, but you feel like they're not necessarily getting the most out of some of those starters. Do you have like a wider opinion about that we talked about earlier?
Yeah, I was just like thinking to John and myself earlier, where like really on paper, the Valkyries are all sixth women essentially. None of them really started last year.
A handful, yeah.
A couple games, Kayla Thornton started a couple games, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But Connecticut, Marina started games in Chicago. Yeah. Tina started every game in Atlanta. Mm-hmm. So like JC Sheldon started in Dallas last year. So like really on paper, you would think, and I feel like preseason rankings, people had Golden State being at the bottom, mm-hmm. Connecticut, a couple above that at least. And you would think, they at least have some starting experience. So mm-hmm. like, what is it that is just making this team so much worse? And I do think so much of that is just the hype around Golden State. Like, oh, it's new, all the fans, mm-hmm. The new experience. They're really building a culture in Golden State. Mm-hmm. So they're kind of starting from the bottom and rising as a franchise, where Connecticut like was so high and it has just crashed down. Mm-hmm. So I do think Coach Mezian's job is like incredibly hard at this point.
Sure.
And he knows that. Like he knew that coming in. And I hope he's not just immediately fired, or if they relocate, he's fired. Mm-hmm. Because any time he talks, he says, yeah, we know we're bad. Mm-hmm. And we're just like trying to make the most of it. So like he's being realistic, but I do think there's still something where he has to like work better on building the team up and building up hype, because I don't think it shouldn't be this horrible.
Mm.
When you think about businesses that are selling through the roof, like aloe or skins, sure, you think about a great product, a cool brand, and brilliant marketing. But an often overlooked secret is actually the businesses behind the business, making selling and, for shoppers, buying simple. For millions of businesses, that business is Shopify. Nobody does selling better than Shopify. With Shop Pay, that boosts conversions up to 50%, meaning way less carts are going abandoned and way more sales happening. So if you're into growing your business, your commerce platform better be ready to sell whatever your customers are scrolling or strolling on the web, in your store, in their feed, and everywhere in between. Businesses that sell more sell on Shopify. Upgrade your business and get the same checkout Skins uses. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/Westwood1, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/Westwood1 to upgrade your selling today. Shopify.com/Westwood1.
Hi, I'm Richard Karn, and you may have seen me on TV talking about the world's #1 expandable garden hose. Well, the brand new Pocket Hose Copperhead with Pocket Pivot is here, and it's a total game changer. Old-fashioned hoses get kinks and creases at the spigot, but the Copperhead's Pocket Pivot swivels 360 degrees for full water flow and freedom to water with ease all around your home. When you're all done, this rust-proof anti-burst hose shrinks back down to pocket size for effortless handling and tidy storage. Plus, your super light and ultra-durable Pocket Hose Copperhead is backed with a 10-year warranty. What could be better than that? I'll tell you what, an exciting exclusive offer just for you. For a limited time, you can get a free Pocket Pivot and their 10-pattern sprayer with the purchase of any size Copperhead hose. Just text WATER to 64,000. That's WATER to 64,000 for your 2 free gifts with purchase. WATER to 64,000.
By texting 64,000, you agree to receive recurring automated marketing messages from Pocket Hose. Message and data rates may apply. No purchase required. Terms apply. Available at pockethose.com/terms.
Yeah, I get it. Like it is, it's a bummer how rough it is, and it helps that the expectations are low, but like you said, Matthew, that they were a year ago the #1 team in the league, and now they are very clearly the bottom team, and I don't expect them to necessarily crawl out of the bottom this season. I kind of feel like they are where they're going to be, but we'll see. There's the possibility of relocation, and this team sort of getting a jolt of something new, as they've been in Mohegan Sun since 2003, after they were purchased by the Tribe. But now there's these ongoing discussions exploring different investment opportunities and the potential of relocation. I want to pass it to you, Matthew. Have you had any thought about like the potential relocation of this team?
Yeah, well, I think first of all, like just to touch on the relocation rumors as a whole, one of the things that like once I started hearing them, I was like, oh, like everything kind of makes sense because they're bringing in lots of players that they can kind of get rid of quickly, and a coach that coming over from Europe, it's like a weirdness. It's like easy to kind of get rid of, like you said, easy to kind of scapegoat, and all these things. It all of a sudden makes sense. You're like, oh, this is a team that like is looking to be sold, right? Because then you have instead of a team that has a general manager or a coach or has players that are going to stay, it's like if you sell the team, then the new owner gets to bring in their new GM, gets to bring in their new coach, gets to bring in their new players, etc. So it's like all of a sudden that makes sense. And I think that one of the things that I think would be good just in general for them is that you don't see the like crazy fan support where they are that you see in a lot of these other teams that are gaining that support. And I think part of that is a result of them being a little bit kind of out in the middle of nowhere. You don't really see them drawing, other than, obviously the one time that they went to Boston last year, they drew Boston fans. But I remember even with that, a lot of these fans were saying, oh, I've never been to a game. I don't know any of the players on the Sun. They interviewing these fans. It's like, okay, they don't have a huge fan base in Boston, even though in theory they could based on geography. And so I think that part of what makes the Valkyries, maybe overachieving or more successful is that they have, an identity. They have lots of built-in fans right away. And so I think that, there definitely is a benefit that I think to getting somewhere where you can have a larger fan base, you can be tied into an identity. There definitely just isn't like the growth opportunities necessarily, staying where they are without things changing. And I think the easiest change would be ending up somewhere else and be able to grow and build there, which is, sort of why the collapse happened so quickly, I think, is that there was sort of a realization that it's going to be very difficult to make this team competitive without changing a lot. And, if the decision is, well, they're not ready to change a lot now, they're not ready to build a big arena, they're not ready to expand their outreach, it's like, well, then you kind of need to sell the team. And it's like, now's the time. Where Portland's playing next year in the Moda Center is almost twice as big as the Mohegan Sun Arena. And so you just look at that it's like, okay, how much money can the Sun make, selling tickets? It's like a lot less than these other teams, right? That it's, like 6,000 less than, where I was at Climate Pledge Arena up in Seattle, and 9,500 less than the Moda Center. Just, it's like, if you're going to have a hard rebuild, and it's going to get even harder as the league gets better, as the league gets more popular. And so, it's like, we're just like, okay, understandable if the best move is to get it somewhere where that's an easier process versus where it seems kind of almost impossible where they are now.
Yeah. I was actually just reading about this before we got on here, but so I was learning, reminding myself about the purchase of this team by the Mohegan Tribe. They were purchased back in 2003 for only $10 million, which seems crazy to me. That seems like such a small amount of money, considering that you have the Lakers getting sold for at a $10 billion valuation, like literally 100 times or 1,000 times. Like it's kind of bonkers to me. I mean, of course, this is 2003 money, but the league hasn't had a relocation since 2017 when the Silver Stars moved from San Antonio to Las Vegas, and now they're the Las Vegas Aces. So it is kind of returning back to, I mean, of course, we just got the first expansion team for the first time since 2008. So now we're going to potentially look into relocation. I've spent all this time saying, well, it makes the most sense that they're just going to move to Boston. It said that their presenting sponsor, their lead sponsor next year for the Sun team is likely going to be TD Bank, and the Celtics play at TD Garden. So you can infer basically that it would probably be Boston. But then I learned that there's only one other WNBA team that plays in an arena that is also a host to the NBA and to an NHL team. And unless the Celtics owners outright purchase this team, there could be, a potentially really expensive bill to pay to rent the space to play in TD Garden. So it's not like a guaranteed situation. And, one of these important things that you brought up is having the ability to fill more seats. So you need to kind of have at least a college arena that is capable of hosting if you can't outright go to TD Garden. So unless that's where they're intending to be and they're intending to foot that bill, they may be looking at other cities that have arenas of decent size. I do still think it makes sense to, sort of shoe this team in to stay in the region that they're in and go to Boston, wherever that looks like. I don't know every arena in Boston, but it is just interesting to say that it's a clear cut situation. But I do agree that they need to sell the team with how things are going now. They need the revolution of a new identity, a new place, a new location, a new potential group of fans.
No, this is definitely the time, because tune into our CBA episode coming out soon. But yeah, if you want any free agents coming to your team in this offseason, this insane free agent offseason, you need to be in a better situation. So it seems like they're really looking into it. So hopefully we get more news about that soon.
Right.
But I do want to talk about the games.
Sure.
The Sun games. Yeah. They went 0-3 this week, unfortunately. But Matthew, why don't you just start talking about your experience when they played Seattle? How was that?
Yeah, I mean, really fun. I think, talking about attendance, partly because the game last year was 3:00 on a Thursday for some reason, wild. But this game, much better attended this year, awesome environment. But yeah, really fun experience there. And I think also what was cool just from that perspective also is just that there were a lot of fans around me that didn't seem to know a ton about basketball, but were still excited to be there. And I think that's good, because there's, if you're just getting people who are already big basketball fans, obviously that's how, we all came to be WNBA fans. But I think that there's a limited amount of people who are willing to just constantly be watching basketball all year round. And so I think it's good that there are people who don't know what's going on to some extent and are still excited to be there, are excited to learn. People that were sitting right on the other side of me and my sister, they kept leaning over and asking questions what's going on? And there's a challenge. They're like, I've never heard of a challenge before. What's that? And they had all these questions. It's so I think that was a really cool experience, just of realizing that it appears at least in Seattle that the new fans they're bringing in are actually new fans to basketball in general, which is cool. Sure. And I think important towards actually having growth. It was a very packed, very fun environment to be in, even though it was very sad that I think I only saw two other Sun fans in the entire arena. Very very sad. That whenever they make a shot, I'd get up and clap it. Nobody else would.
Sometimes it's like that. Sometimes you just got to be the lone fan in the stands supporting your squad. I want to highlight, I guess, in this game, if we're going to start here, Anissa Morrow, a rookie who has been in and out of the rotation. Even this week, she started the first game and she came off the bench in the other two. She had her career high. She scored 20 points. Of course, her opportunities increased near the end of the game when it was all benches on both sides. But I do generally believe in Anissa Morrow as a somewhat franchise cornerstone for this team. I mean, it's her and Sanaya Rivers that you kind of have to hitch your wagon to. They're your two rookies. And of course, Rhea Marshall as well. They're going to be here next year, regardless of what you decide to do. So I believe that Coach Mezian should be giving the three of them as much opportunity to play, a lot of minutes as possible. And there were cool moments where Sanaya passes to Morrow for an easy layup. That was awesome. Anissa proved to me this week that her jumper actually looks pretty nice. There are moments that I believe in her 3-point shot as well. So I think she's a player that with more time can continue to develop.
To say something here on Anissa Morrow, one of the things
Mhm.
like you said, like she started her first game this week, which is a big jump. And I think that, one of the things that we see with this Sun team is that they're willing to give these players a lot more playing time, because like one of the things that the score in the Seattle game was like really lopsided for like a while there, because Connecticut pulled all their starters and Seattle kept most of their starters in for like the third quarter. So it's like, obviously, like, Seattle can do whatever they want, and they're obviously the better team there, but it's like just to be able to see, Anisha, I think she got like 23 minutes, in that game. And it's like, that's a valuable learning experience. And you said that her 3 points really coming across there. I think it's, interesting as a player for someone who is, listed as a forward. Her 3-point shooting is actually better than her overall field goal percentage. And so I think that's something that is interesting, because you see some of her having some issues, when she's like contested on shots and stuff. And you would imagine that, if she gets better, if she gets stronger, some of these things, that's going to improve. And it's like 3-point percentage, probably, at the age of 22, that's probably close to as good as it's going to get, right? You're not going to see massive jump up, but to look and say, well, she's a, plus 40% 3-point shooter. If she can just get that, overall field goal percent up to, the high 40s, that becomes a really scary player to guard on defense, versus now she kind of gets bullied a little bit, sometimes. And I think that's part of just coming in and being a rookie and not being able to adapt to the physicality. And I think, you see a lot of second year players come and like improve just because they like spend a lot of time in the gym on the off season and are like a lot stronger. And I think that she's somebody who, if she's able to just like get more of a presence and get stronger, I think that that's somebody who could be a starting caliber player in the W in, a year or two. She's someone who can be quite good. The other player that I think has really jumped out to me is JC Sheldon, of just somebody who, yes, was a starter for roughly half the games last year in Dallas, and coming here and has just made a pretty big step up from where she was in Dallas. She shot like about 38% last year, and she's shooting pretty much right at 50% this year. So a pretty big jump up there. And, just the fact that, she's able to shoot even when she's not open, which is like, last year, with the Sun, one of the big things is that, all these players were shooting wide open because, that's sort of how AT plays. She draws, a double team and can get the passes, these crazy passes out. There's no one on this team that can do that. And so every shot, every player has a defender on them because no one's making these openings. And still JC Sheldon is able to come in there and like make some of these shots, and she ends that game, only with 15 points, but was one of the starters that they brought out. Didn't play very much after halftime in that game.
I mean, the thing that I have to say about JC is she's pretty much she's the most legit shooter on the team. I mean, I know that Marina is the one who shoots the most threes. Marina's averaging like 7.5 attempts per game from three, and JC's only averaging just under 3, but JC's hitting them at like 42%. So in my notes, I said, Coach Mezian, you should just let JC shoot 7-8 threes a game. And of course, when she has issues of getting open, if they could figure out some sort of an action that gets her just a little bit of space, I believe in the time it takes for her to get the ball up, and at the percentage that she's knocking them down, you could find yourself at least being more competitive in some of these games if you just increase some of those attempts by JC. But again, good to see that she's developing because of how her role was in Dallas.
Hi, I'm Richard Karn, and you may have seen me on TV talking about the world's #1 expandable garden hose. Well, the brand new Pocket Hose Copperhead with Pocket Pivot is here, and it's a total game changer. Old-fashioned hoses get kinks and creases at the spigot, but the Copperhead's Pocket Pivot swivels 360 degrees for full water flow and freedom to water with ease all around your home. When you're all done, this rust-proof anti-burst hose shrinks back down to pocket size for effortless handling and tidy storage. Plus, your super light and ultra durable pocket hose Copperhead is backed with a 10-year warranty. What could be better than that? I'll tell you what, an exciting exclusive offer just for you. For a limited time, you can get a free pocket pivot and their 10-pattern sprayer with the purchase of any size Copperhead hose. Just text WATER to 64,000. That's WATER to 64,000 for your 2 free gifts with purchase. WATER to 64,000.
By texting 64,000, you agree to receive recurring automated marketing messages from Pocket Hose. Message and data rates may apply. No purchase required. Terms apply. Available at pockethose.com/terms.
Well, the player I want to talk about is Tina Charles. I was excited for Tina coming into this season because she's trying to break the all-time points record.
Scoring record,
of course. Yeah. That's not really going well. So I'm kind of sad for Tina.
Sure.
I will say Tina as well is having a better year technically in scoring.
Sure.
A couple more points than last year.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think she's struggling more in rebounds. She has less rebounds than she's had. And I think part of that comes from how hard are we really trying here? Mm-hmm. And I don't want to say like anyone is not doing their best, but I think Tina's getting older. She's not like putting her body on the line like she probably did in the past to try to get every single rebound. So that does contribute, I think, to some of the reason that the team could be struggling. And this week really in particular was not a great week from Tina. She only had 9 points in the first game against the Valkyries. She only had 7 points and 2 rebounds in this game against the Storm. She did have 18 points in the middle game, but she only had 3 rebounds. So it was also a down week from Tina. So we are rooting for Tina. Keep scoring, but don't like kill yourself on the whole rebounding. That's fine.
Yeah.
I can take
it easy.
Yeah.
Yeah. My expectations for Tina Charles, we talked about this in the preseason. I was thinking that she was going to be like a 25 point per game scorer. That was like such a ridiculous thing for me to expect. Because
I don't think that was ridiculous.
I don't know. I was just like, oh, somebody's got to score the ball. And it's kind of ended up being Tina and Marina. But with Marina not around, I guess I was sort of expecting Tina to score a little more this week than she did. But yeah, I mean, it's got to be difficult when you're really not playing for anything. But, they talk about how the announcers talk about how much of a mentor Tina Charles is. And that was kind of how we foresaw her role on this team. Like mentor the young players, mentor the players that are trying to get their second contracts in a crazy offseason. There are a lot of benefits to Tina Charles being on the team, and she is very much still the leader of this franchise. It's just an aspect of, how much is she actually capable to do on her own? Unfortunately, not enough to, muster more than 2 wins at this point in time.
Yeah, and I think part of that is the fact that you're looking at, I just have her stats up here. She's playing an entire minute per game less than her lowest season ever, and 3 or 4 minutes less per game than her peak. But again, like you said, also with the rebounds, averaging 5 this season. Her next lowest was when she averaged 7 back in 2018. The best case scenario of this team, if I was thinking, preseason, would be that she'd be scoring, at a similar 15 plus points a night, but also like drawing double teams and stuff. I think it's interesting that she's scoring 15, but like she's never really double teamed, which again goes back to like how somebody like JC Sheldon is always shooting contested shots because she's never open. And so it's interesting that, she's sort of achieving what I thought she could do in terms of like the points of, the sort of 15 to 20 range is what I was expecting her to be at. But it's like, she's not really doing that because she's, not considered the threat that she would have been even 2 or 3 years ago. She's not as good as she used to be. And so the team's like, well, we can put somebody on her. And even if she scores 15 a night, as long as nobody else around her is scoring enough, like it doesn't really matter. Right.
Sure. Well, I think, we talked a lot about this game and we sort of spread it to the other games. We can kind of just go grab bag here for the rest of the show here as we start to wrap things up. I mean, the other two games this week that they played, they lost to Golden State by 24 and they lost to the Aces by 26. And in both cases, they were down significantly at basically the midpoint of both of those games. So they were kind of very similar. At least in the Seattle game, they have sort of an interesting fourth quarter. But I want to just mention that there was the briefest glimmer of hope in that Aces game and the Aces have been, they've had trouble throughout the season this year. But there was a moment in time where the score went to Vegas 40, Sun 36 after JC Sheldon hit a three and Sanaya Rivers stole the ball for an easy layup. And I guess I'll just use this opportunity to mention Sanaya Rivers, who is a player that I very much have enjoyed watching this season. She's second amongst rookies in steals, and she leads the league in leads the team in steals. So she's a very interesting defensive player. She's very long, which makes her a fun watch. And, as I watch her get more play time for this Sun team, it's clear to me that she's really capable of shaking the defender and getting an open shot for herself. However, the shots just aren't falling. And that I believe that if she can start to make some of these shots, she could be a really special player in the league. And I think she has the motor to make that happen. Obviously, we've seen her how close she is to Marina already. So I believe in Sanaya Rivers as well, sort of similar to how I feel about Anissa Morrow, maybe if not a rung above that. And, I just want to give Sanaya her flowers because I do believe that she deserves it because she is playing hard on a team that doesn't have a lot to play for.
Absolutely. I think, with that also, like when I was talking about like them being like, sort of surprisingly good on like fast break defense, I think she's a lot of that because she gets back very quickly. And, the way that she goes up against players, it sort of is like this weird mismatch because she's like, I don't know exactly how tall she is, but she's certainly, longer arms than all those guards that she's guarding. And so that's what allows her to get some steals. I think you're definitely right with the idea of the numbers don't necessarily tell the whole story with her because she's shooting a lot worse than you'd sort of anticipate. And so it's one of these things that I think you could see her, come back after an off season and just be like a lot better. Obviously the experience she's getting is good, but I think it's one of these things that I would anticipate her being a player that like actually makes a big jump over an off season because you just like probably good for her to be on a bad team this year. She can play a lot, learn what she needs to do, and then, hopefully spend a lot of the off season just working on her shooting. She started, 11 out of 14 games so far, only averaging a little under 7 points a game. That's not great, but it's like if you add all of the shots that are like good shots that she's missing, if you add those at an 80% rate, like, some of the great shooters have, of these, close shots, you're making a lot more than you're missing. If she could get that, she'd be very good. And it's like, I don't expect that to happen necessarily right now, but it's like, it's possible.
Absolutely. Kristen, did you have any last thoughts about any of these players or this team in general? Outlooks? Just wishing them the best.
In general, not too much. No, I really do wish these rookies the best because I hope that they get as much playtime as possible and they can really keep developing on this team so that they can either be a playoff team on this team in a couple of years or be able to get really good contracts when their contracts are up and move around. So I'm wishing at least the rookies the very best. Of course, Tina, of course, Marina, of course, JC, everyone. I want the best for them.
Yeah.
And I just hope the vibes stay good. Like, even though this is the worst team score-wise, like record-wise, I don't think it's the worst team vibes-wise, at least. So that's a positive.
Right. It helps with those low expectations that, at least Marina and Sanaya have their friendship, have their TikToks. And that is a beautiful thing to see. Matthew, before we close it out, do you have any final thoughts that you haven't gotten to express about this Sun team?
Well, one thing that I will touch on, just what Kristen was saying about like the vibes not being absolutely horrible. There was somebody who was on the bench at the Seattle game who not one of the coaches, I don't think, because I didn't recognize her, but like she was like super jumping up and energetic, and like, you know, whenever any of the players would come off, be subbed off, she'd, you know, jump up and like give them high fives and stuff. And so I think that there's you know, certainly still some energy there, and I think that it's like, yeah, the worst thing that could happen for these player development is for that to kind of go away and it to just be like absolutely miserable. And so, yeah, you know, I concur that I hope that the mood stays up. And again, like you said, that there's no expectations, which is hopefully good for them not being disgruntled, even the fact that they are, you know, somehow failing to meet the no expectations somehow, you know, but, you know, hopefully they can, you know, not think about that too much and stay positive as they go.
Yeah, totally agree. Well, let's wrap this one up. Matthew, you alluded to this. We're going to do a bonus episode. We're going to talk about the Portland expansion team coming next year, and we're going to talk about the CBA. You have a lot of thoughts about the CBA. We haven't really discussed the CBA on this podcast, so I'm looking forward to getting into that. But just want to thank you so much for giving us your firsthand experience talking about this Suns Seattle game, and appreciate you coming on the pod.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Of course. Well, we're going to get into that bonus episode, but Kristen, I'm staring at the baseline, and what are we going to do?
Attack it.
Attack the baseline. Thank you so much for listening, and we will be back shortly talking about the CBA.
If your job at a healthcare facility includes disinfecting against viruses, you know prevention is the best medicine. And maintaining healthy spaces starts with a healthy cleaning routine. Grainger's world-class supply chain helps ensure you have the quality products you need when you need them. From disinfectants and cleaning supplies to personal protective equipment, so you can help deliver a clean bill of health. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.